Hello YouTube and welcome back to UK Highland Photography. I'm Strober and today we're going to be talking about photographing the moon. It's the 28th of September 2015 and in the early hours of today we had a Supermoon Lunar Eclipse. It's also being branded as the blood moon because the moon appeared to be reddish hue when it was hid in Earth's shadows. Now, let's just quickly talk about how we photograph the actual moon itself. Okay? When we photograph the moon, we've got to decide two things. Do we want to have the moon and the landscape, or do we just want to focus on the moon? If we just want to focus on the moon itself, then that means we're going to be using a telezoom lens like this one here. This one I used yesterday to help me photograph the actual stages of the eclipse of the supermoon. This lens is a 175mm to 500mm lens. Now, moving on, if we're going to use a landscape shot with the moon, then we're going to use a wide lens, such as this one here, which is the 18mm to 55mm. One of the things what we've got to understand about the moon is that it is reflected light from the sun. So we've got the moon here and we've got the sun here. So what we're seeing from planet Earth is the light being reflected of the moon to us. So again, the sun reflects the light off the moon and it comes down to us. That is why it was hidden in the shadows on the 20th of September 2015, because planet Earth blocked the light from the sun to the moon. Now, when you photograph the moon, you've got to understand that shutter speed is the main key to photographing the moon. So let's move on to an example and we'll see exactly what we mean about this. So have a look at this photograph. You see this photograph? This photograph was shot on a long exposure. If you photograph the moon on a long exposure, you're going to let in too much light. Now have a look at this photograph. This photograph is being used with the fastest shutter speed, and in this case we have let in the correct amount of light. We can see the shadows of the moon and we can also see the highlights of the moon. However, if we have a look at this photograph, then we can see that the moon appears far too dark, which means we've used too fast of a shutter speed. So as a photographer, when you're photographing the moon, it's up to you to decide what is the correct exposure it is that you would prefer to have. Nobody can tell you, it's only you as the photographer that can make that decision. Now, well, what else we have to remember with the moon and it being reflected light is the simple fact, if we use a long exposure, and I mean a really long exposure like 3 minutes, then what happens is we turn our photographs from nighttime into daytime. Let me show you, have a look at this photograph. You see this photograph? Now, people may think that was taken during the daytime when the sun was up in the sky. It wasn't. It was taken in the early hours of the morning, and that object in the sky is the moon and not the sun. So as photographers, if we use long exposures, we can actually turn nighttime into daytime, which is pretty strange, but then it's not strange if we remember that the light being reflected of the moon is coming from the sun. So it's not that strange if you think about it that way. So let's move on and have a look at this photograph. Now, as you can see in this photograph, this is the stages of the eclipse what I photographed in the early hours of today. So how did I make this image? Well, again, I wanted to isolate just the moon. That is why I used this lens, which is the telezoom lens, because the moon is the only thing I want to focus on in this photograph. So I really zoomed into it, and then I basically used a faster shutter speed to get the amount of light it was that I wanted, and then I remained with that shutter speed for the following photographs. So this photograph is made up of 4 different photos. So I took this photo, then I took this photo, then I took this photo, and then I took this photo. And once I took all 4 photos, I layered them in Photoshop in order to make one photo. So I had the first photo, the second photo, the third photo, the fourth photo, and then I just made one photo by flattening the image. And that is basically how I made that staged eclipse photograph of the moon. Now, one of the things what I wanted to do in that photograph was I wanted to give the photograph more of a reality, because the stages you see in the photo of the moon going down, that's the actual path that the moon does take. Remember, the moon rises and then it sets again. Now, there's a lot of photographers, and what they're doing with theirs is they put in the full moon here, they put in, you know, eclipse here, and they put in one down here. So they're basically making a square, or you've got the people making straight lines. But in this case, with my photograph, I wanted to show the viewer the actual stages, and I wanted to represent a reality of the moon, you know, setting back down again. So that's why I made my photograph like that. And then on this day, I basically decided I wanted something special. You know, we're talking about a supermoon. It's a lunar eclipse, and it's also a blood moon. So this happens like every 30 years. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity for me to take this kind of photograph. So I wanted something special. I wanted to make a photograph what nobody else, you know, will be doing. I wanted to be different. So instead, I took a selfie of myself underneath the supermoon. And have a look at this photograph. That is me looking up at that gigantic moon, the supermoon. That's me looking up at that moon. So how did I make that photograph? Well, to be honest with you guys, it was pretty difficult to make, but it wasn't that difficult. But let me talk to you about the stages it was that I did go through. So obviously, I had my camera on a tripod, right? We all know that. Camera must be on the tripod when you're shooting night photography. I used a wide lens. The reason why I used a wide lens is because this photograph is no longer about the moon. It's now about the moon, myself, and the landscape, which is why I used a wide lens. Now, the problem is when you shoot at night is that your DSLRs can't really autofocus. They're not very good at autofocusing in the pitch black when there's nothing for the light autofocus lamp to bounce back from. So what I had to do was I had to get the flashlight, you know, a torch with your flash, you can, get one of them, and I took that over to the point where I was going to stand with my bike. And I put the flashlight down and I pointed it towards my camera. And then I focused the camera to lock onto that light. So the autofocus locked on to the flashlight. Once it went beep beep and I heard the focus, I then switched it into manual mode. The reason why I switched it into manual mode, the lens, manual focus, is because when I take my second photograph and my third photograph, I don't want the autofocus to go hunting. You know what I mean by hunting? It's when the autofocus starts going and it's so annoying. So that's why I just locked on once, switched on to manual focus, and I can take as many photographs as I want without problems. So the next stage I used was I set the DSLR to 2.5 seconds. So that's 1, 2, you get me, 2.5 seconds. And what that allowed me to do was it allowed me to soak up enough light in order to expose me from the shadows here on planet Earth. So if you have a look at this photo again, the moon, it looks slightly overexposed, but that's why I want it. You know, I didn't want to mess around. Remember, it's not about the moon this time, it's about me, the moon, and the landscape. So in order to illuminate me and the landscape, I needed to overexpose the supermoon. And I did, and I don't care because I think it looks awesome. And how did I activate my camera? Simple. I used an infrared remote control. So I basically set my DSLR on a 2-second delay. I pressed the infrared remote control. My DSLR started going beep, beep, and then I turned around, paused, looked at the moon, and it recorded me for 2.5 seconds. And that is basically how I made this photograph. So what problems did I face this night? To be honest with you, I really didn't face any photographs with regards to photographing the supermoon. Did I say Superman there? I meant supermoon. Now, I can't believe it just says Superman. Right, anyway, so the problems that I faced that night really was the morning dew. You know what I mean? DEW, dew, which is condensation from the weather. Basically, my lens, my lens looked like it was raining. It was just covered in water, so I had to make sure I had to have a cloth to clean it. And not only that, my lens started fogging over as well. So I had to get the cloth to, you know, clean the fog off so the camera could see again, etc. But apart from that, guys, it was a superb night. So to finish this to finish this video with, remember, when you're photographing the moon, if you're going to just focus on the moon, use a telezoom lens, use a shutter speed that's fast if you want to see the shadows of the moon. Use a slow shutter speed if you want a brighter moon. And basically just experiment and enjoy your night photography. Guys, thank you for watching the video. And remember to subscribe, and I'll see you all later. And when you get the time, check out the online shop over at www.ukhighland.com.